Okay, good evening, Tabo. I see you're the only student arriving, so thank you very much for attending the live session. I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. We've waited 5 minutes for more students to arrive, but unfortunately, there aren't any other students. So it looks like it's just the two of us tonight. Before we begin, just want to announce a few things regarding the material that's on Cole Campus. If you've logged into Cole Campus and you've gone to look under the modules link, you'll see obviously week by week content that has been uploaded by Janet, who is the acting academic manager. Both live Zoom classes are available on the actual platform. So full time, this was the full time group, and then obviously that was the part time. So the same will be done for week 3. I obviously hosted a session earlier today, and I'm hosting the current session now. Both of those videos will be sent to Janet, and then she'll make sure that those two videos are uploaded to the actual platform. So if there are students that are watching this video, please try attend the live sessions. It's obviously better in terms of interaction. If you have any questions or topics that you want me to go over in more detail, this is obviously your time. So please make use of the live sessions if you can attend. There are workshops that are being planned for week 5. We're currently in week 3. Week 4, we have workshops for finance in media. So I will make an announcement for that. It will affect full time because I need to be on campus. So it wouldn't be possible for me to host online from home as well as be on campus at the same time. So Boston has made some arrangements for week 4 and 5. Week 4 will affect diploma students and degree students for finance in media. And then in week 5, all of you will have your on campus workshops, and that'll be communicated to all of you by management. So I just want to let all of you know in advance. Next week, I will still have part time Zoom sessions next week, but it's just the full time classes. But I will send a note on WhatsApp, and I will also post something on Cole Campus once all of that's been confirmed by management. Okay, so that's just a little bit about content. Before we begin, Tabo, is there anything specific that you've looked at that you want me to go over in more detail?
No, Anthony, so far so good.
So far, so
There's
good.
nothing that I've got in question.
Okay, all right, perfect. If I recall correctly, I think
Yeah.
you said you were working at multi-choice as well, similar to some of the other students I've had. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm with my teachers.
Nice, yes. Okay, so what
Yes,
I'm going to try
100%.
do, just to get you to apply some of the concepts that we've looked at before, I see students haven't been engaging that much on the actual platform. There was a post from last week regarding the objectives and purposes of accounting. So maybe just to ask you those questions that I had posted here. In terms of the double entry, we obviously know that accountants need to use debits and credits to record transactions. So that is the double entry, and we will look at that more in chapter 3. To start off with, just to get us going in terms of the actual content, I'd like to ask you: can you think of a user of accounting? So who would be a user of accounting in the media industry? Maybe think about multi-choice and think of a user that would be involved in that particular industry. Who would use
I
accounting?
think who do you say accounting within media industry?
Yes, who would use the actual accounting? Any idea? Can you think of a user, someone? You can use the chat if you want to. Obviously, it's a smaller class, so audio is great. I see we actually have another student that just joined. Welcome, Dumasani. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tabo, can you think of a user?
Okay, yeah, I'll put it on the chat. Thank you.
Oh, you're going to put it on the chat. Okay. Dumasani, can you think of a user? I'm just reflecting on one of the discussion points on the actual Cole Campus platform. Can you think of a user? Who would be a user of accounting in the media industry? What would we need to use that for? So in other words, the user. Can you think of anyone? Dumasani, can you think of anyone?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. The thing is, my earphones, I am losing you there because they are not connecting properly.
Oh, okay, I understand. You're having some technical problems with the audio. All right, that's fine, not a problem.
Yes.
I see Tabo's given us an answer in the chat. Managers, perfect. Good answer, Tabo. Okay, so when looking at users and the use, we need to understand that obviously one looks at the actual role players. In other words, the individual, okay, managers, CEOs, it could be investors, it could be government. Okay, when we looked at the content last week, we spoke about government using the information to make decisions based on the performance of the business. What happened last week? A very important announcement on Wednesday. Obviously, we had our live session on Tuesday. Did any of you watch what happened on Wednesday? Does anyone know what happened on Wednesday? Last week, Wednesday.
It's actually my first time logging in, Hate. So I just finished my the registration last week. So I'm
Okay.
actually trying to catch up here.
Okay, no, that's fine. Not a problem. But in terms of general knowledge, in terms of what happened in the country last week, Wednesday, was there something important that happened? Anyone follow the news? Anyone know what happened last week, Wednesday? Yes or no? Okay, yes, I do understand you're catching up. That's great. It's always nice to have more students join. Tabo says no. Okay. The budget speech. 2021 budget speech presented by the finance minister, Mr. Tito Mboweni. Did any of
Oh,
you
you're
watch
talking
part of the
about
budget
that.
or listen to it or downloaded some information about the budget? Now that you know what happened last week, Wednesday, do you know what the budget is? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to just speak to that point. A user of accounting would be government. Government would use accounting to present information to the public. So when we watched the budget last week, Wednesday, you would have seen they broke up the budget in terms of revenue that government is collecting and they're allocating it to different areas. So money will be given to education, safety, infrastructure, health, social security, all of those areas in government. So remember, the budget is a form of accounting. Government is accounting for the revenue that they're going to be collecting and the revenue that they're going to be using within the country. Right, so that's an example of a user. I do have a summary of the actual budget speech for 2021 that was presented last week, which I'm going to send to Janet for uploading onto the actual Cole Campus platform for next week's content, just to share with all of the students a bit more practical knowledge and information regarding accounting and numbers. Okay, numbers, accounting, finance, it's everywhere. Okay, I'm sure even some of you might have entered into certain transactions earlier today. Maybe you went to the shops and you had purchased something. Purchasing something from the shops is a financial transaction. It's a form of accounting. And then we obviously need to look at the use. So the user would be the individual, okay, the actual person, okay, who's using the information. It could be government, it could be an investor, it could be anyone. Right, lots of different business people need accounting. And how do they use it? Well, here you need to apply the knowledge. So government would use accounting of a company to identify how much profit they've made because they need to tax that company. Okay, so companies have to pay tax. If you watch the budget, companies' tax stayed the same. There was no increase in companies' tax. It's still 28% flat income tax for companies. And then obviously individuals as well. We have tax that we need to pay. Almost everyone has to contribute a certain amount of tax towards the country. So when looking at the use, if we're looking specifically at the media industry, okay, if we're looking at a company like MultiChoice or Media24 or Caxton, okay, those are media companies, and those media companies would need to report to SARS in terms of their income and the taxes that's due to SARS. So a use of accounting could just be that. It could be SARS's role in terms of calculating tax that different companies, individuals, all parties would have to contribute to the fiscus, okay, to the National Treasury's budget. Okay, all right. So that's just a note about those discussion questions. Please, if you can, try answer and engage on the platform. I've already posted Chapter 2's considerations. Okay, there are some questions there for you to have a look at. And that's obviously coming from Week 3's content. Okay, so page 20 to page 35 is what we're focusing on this week. If we go look at your textbook.
35.
Sorry, what was that? Dumasani, you had a question?
Is it page 20 to 35 or to 25?
Page 20 to page 30. 35, actually. Yes, 35. Sorry, I think that might have been a typo. Let me go back to this. Page 35, yeah. Okay, did I say page 30? I apologize. Yeah, page 20 to 35. Okay, so that's the content. It is outlined in the actual roadmap. So if you go to modules, you'll see in the actual lesson roadmap for week 3, it is outlined. Okay, there's a step-by-step process. You do need to download that roadmap and then cover the pages that's referenced there. But have a look at those videos because those videos cover the actual content. I've actually gone through all those pages live in a video so that students can watch that video to have additional support. Okay, and then these sessions that we have live are to cover questions and to go through activities that students are struggling with. All right, so just to highlight the importance of Chapter 2 again for everyone. Last week we touched on Chapter 2's focus because it addresses the objectives and the purposes of accounting and the actual recording. So we know accounting in terms of history is based on a system where businesses are accounting for the transactions that are taking place in the organization. You'll see later there's a list of transactions. That's the last bit of this particular chapter before we move to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is going to bring in the more practical aspects of accounting, and there we're going to spend more time looking at the actual application of the rules, right? How do we debit? How do we credit? How do we apply our knowledge of accounting to different transactions? Hey, for now, we're still looking at theory. Just to recap, users and uses. Okay, we spoke about that a few minutes ago when we addressed those questions on Cole Campus. The last thing that we looked at last week was developments in accounting, and then internal and external reporting is where we're going to start this week. So if you have a look at page 19, you'll see page 19 talked about the development of accounting. Does anyone remember what IFRS stands for? International what?
It's an international accounting standards,
Very
if
good.
I'm not correct.
100%, yes. Okay, International Financial Accounting Standards. So when we spoke about accounting in terms of context, we said accounting is an international language of business. So all of you that are doing accounting as part of your BBA, you'll have an advantage. You'll be able to interpret information that others might not have the same skill in identifying, interpreting, understanding. So just remember that when looking at finance, when looking at financial management specifically, yes, All of you are going to be involved in the media industry, and you're going to be part of those decisions. But having knowledge of accounting is important because it's part of business, right? Businesses have assets, businesses have liabilities, businesses have income, expenses, capital, drawings, etc. So your knowledge of accounting will definitely help you with decisions that you would have to make in a business context. And that's what we're studying here in this particular level. Okay, in level 1, so financial management 1, you're going to be looking at lots of accounting topics because that's the level that we need to obviously look at when we're establishing the basics, okay, the basic principles, the rules, all the fundamentals. Okay, those fundamentals come from accounting, and then those are built on later on when we look at more specific topics in financial management. IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. Make sure you do remember what those acronyms represent. The rules will be covered, not in a lot of detail, but in some detail. Okay, you don't need to know all the different standards. That's not necessary because you're not being trained to be an accountant. But you need the knowledge, the working knowledge, to be able to approach transactions so that you can make good decisions. And that's what we're going to be looking at now in terms of roles. So when looking at week 3's content, just to touch on some of the theory before we look at the actual activities, internal versus external reporting. What's the difference? Does anyone know? Has anyone looked at the content yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go for it. Tell us.
The internal it's more about management accounting, and then the external is more about financial accounting.
Very good. Nice. Good answer. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have 2 types of accounting: financial accounting and management accounting. So internal, as Thabo had said, is management accounting. So why do we need 2 different forms of reporting? Well, the answer to that question is the use. Okay, remember we spoke about users and uses? This is what we're actually looking at here in terms of the reports. Right, so if you're involved in the internal accounting, in other words, the internal reporting, you will be part of management. Okay, so if you're part of marketing and you're deciding on what marketing, let's call them distribution channels or channels, okay, what forms of marketing are you going to be using? Are you going to be using social media? Are you going to be using television? Are you going to be using radio? Are you going to be using print? What are you going to be using to advertise and to market your products and services? Is that important for management? Yes. Will management want to know what forms of marketing is being used within the organization? Of course they will. They want to know how much is being spent on marketing on social media, how much is spent on marketing on television and on radio. Okay, but if you look at external reporting, so remember we spoke about government and we spoke about investors and we spoke about other role players that are outside the organization. Does government need to know where you're spending your marketing? No. Do investors need to know? No, they don't. Okay, government and investors, they just want to know what's the total. Okay, they don't care about the detail. They want to know what's the total marketing budget. In other words, how much did you spend on marketing? They don't need to know where you spent the money in terms of marketing on social media or television or radio. Okay, do you see the difference? Right, it needs to be useful. Okay, so if I'm an investor, it's not useful having all of that information. It's unnecessary information. Right, if you were management, then it's necessary. You need to know where all the money is being spent and how you're breaking up the budget in terms of marketing and what forms of marketing you're using. Right, so when you're looking at internal versus external, always remember that the one is looking at management, the one is looking at financial, right? And that's described later on in the actual textbook, just to highlight some of the theory before we look at the exercises. All right, so management accounts, What are they? They're very detailed accounting records looking at specifics. Okay, look, in other words, the nitty gritty. Okay, you're delving a lot deeper into the actual company's accounts. Okay, so management accounts are very, very specific, and they're normally quite custom. Okay, because managers can decide on what they want in terms of information. All right, so as full-time employees and part-time students, okay, maybe some of you have had to report or create a report for your manager or your supervisor. All right, and this report is normally custom, okay, in terms of what the manager is wanting. The manager might say, I want this, this, and this, and this, and this in those columns. Okay, those are the different things that I want in my accounting report. Okay, or just a general report. It doesn't even have to be accounting. It could just be a report on something that you're involved in. Okay, those reports are all considered management accounts. Okay, because we're looking at accounts, we're just taking it more financial. Here we're actually looking at management accounts relating to finance. Okay, and that can also apply to some of you. Maybe some of you have had to report on invoices that you've had to maybe budget for or pay or submit to finance to get paid, whatever the case might be. Right, but the point is that those reports are very customized and they're quite subjective. They're not objective. Right, if they were objective, then we're looking at this, the external reporting. Okay, so there's IFRS. We just spoke about it earlier. External reports, everyone gets to see it. It's public information. Okay, so I've shown you reports of NASPERS and process. If you go back to week 1 and you look at week 1's content, you would have seen in one of the videos that I had recorded, I spoke to the point regarding businesses that need to create value. And we spoke about assets and liabilities as being very, very, very valuable to a company. So when I'm looking at external reporting, here you don't have a choice. Okay, reporting to outside parties, the public, the JSE, okay, SARS. They require very, very, very specific criteria in terms of the reporting that is presented to them. Okay, if you've ever submitted a return to SARS, you know it's very, very specific. Okay, there's a set format, there's a layout that you need to follow. It's a very strict format. The same with the JSE, the same with IFRS. Right, you have to follow a very, very, very strict format. Okay, so it's important to understand that management accounts and financial accounts, the uses are slightly different. In other words, how is that information going to be used? That's the difference. Okay, the one is very, very much internal and no one's going to see that. Okay, the one is external and everybody's going to see that. Right, and that's why when you've got management accounts, it can be customized because it's inside the company. We spoke about multi-choice earlier. Okay, myself and Tabo was just looking at that. Okay, there's a question. Yes, Dumasani, I see in the chat.
Yeah, I want to find out, is it mandatory that when it comes to financials, is it mandatory that a private entity actually shows their financial statements to the public, or that is only mandatory for the public companies like your SOEs, your parastatals?
Yes, that's a very good question, and you're 100% correct. Yeah, private companies don't have to report on their financials to anyone. Okay, because it's a private company. Okay, it's private. So in other words, financial statements do not get published.
Okay.
Right, so you'll never ever know what's happening within a private company unless you are a director, unless you're an auditor, unless you're doing maybe work for the company and you're required to look at those documentations, then you might be privy to that information. All right, but in most cases, no one will know what's happening in a private company. Right, you spoke about SOEs, parastatals, right, public companies, right, companies like NASPERS. All of those companies, because they're public and they're accountable to the public, those reports are presented to the public. And yes, as you said, it is mandatory. You have to present that information to the public, right? And anyone can access that information. If you go Google financial statements for NASPers, it'll pop up, you can download a copy, and you can have a look at the details. Okay, and that's kind of what I've done for you on the actual, or in the actual week 1 content. Okay, I'm not going to go back to that Cold Campus platform, but I'm just highlighting it for all of you, just in terms of knowledge. If you do go look at week 1's content, you'll see it there. And those are reports that anyone can access. So it's a really good question in terms of reporting. What's even more important in terms of what we're discussing here is those reports, they have to be uniform, and everybody has to report on those assets, liabilities, income, expenses, capital, and drawings exactly the same way. Okay, in other words, there's some consistency. So when we spoke about IFRS, we said it's a language of business. Okay, accounting is a language, and all those countries, those 120 countries around the world, all of them are using the same set of rules to present information. And that's why it's important to understand that information or knowledge can be used universally, especially when you're looking at something that's international. Right, so if you had to download a copy of financial statements from another country, any of these countries, maybe you're looking at a European country and you're looking at their accounting records. Even though you've studied accounting in South Africa, you'll know exactly what's happening because those reports have the same basis of preparation. We're all using IFRS. And that's why it's so powerful, having this knowledge, having this ability to interpret information correctly. Right? So just remember, interpreting information, understanding information, that's the key. That's the important bits. And that's what we're trying to achieve with the subject. Okay, so not to digress too far, just to scroll further down. Different forms of business, just to highlight something that you mentioned. Okay, businesses have certain responsibilities. As a legal person, okay, when I talk about legal person, I'm referring to CCs and companies. Right, CCs and companies are legal persons. They call them juristic persons. Okay, juristic because in the eyes of the law, they're seen as individuals. Okay, not human beings, not natural persons, but juristic persons. Okay, and the reason for that is because those companies actually exist on their own. Okay, NASPers will be around forever. Okay, hundreds and hundreds of years potentially. Okay, some companies that we have in this country have been operating for hundreds of years already. Okay, so just remember that a legal personality would be relating to that that capability. Okay, the businesses that we're looking at are separate. They have that advantage. Okay, they're separate. They can operate separately. They have to pay their own taxes separately. They have legal personality. Okay, so carrying on where we left off in terms of management accounting and financial accounting, just to focus on those activities that you need to complete. Financial accounting, this I've covered in the actual theory video, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we've looked at it already. Tabo explained financial accounting as being summarized, okay, and reporting on external, okay, users' information. Okay, so those users want information, and those external users want information on financial accounting. It's going to be summarized. It's external, so we're sending this information out to other parties. Management accounting is internal. And here we're obviously focusing on managers within the organization. So this is subjective. It's used inside the company. Those are the two forms of accounting that you can get. All right, so let's see if you can answer this activity. Hopefully you've looked at it. If you haven't looked at it yet, this is some practice. Because I didn't get any special requests, I know, Dumasani, you've just registered, so you might not have had a chance to go through any of the content or any of the activities yet. But just for future classes, for next week and the week after, If any of you have covered any of the activities and you're struggling and you don't know how to do the activity, or you have a question about the answer for that activity, then please raise those points in the live sessions. And that's why we're hosting these sessions, so that we can discuss queries, points that students are struggling with, or topics that students want us to go through in more detail. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask each of you just to go along with me and just answer these questions as we go. Provides information mainly for external users. Let's start with Dumisani. Your mic is on. Do you think that's
Yes, it's
financial accounting, or do
accounting.
you think that's management?
It's financial because it's external.
Very good. Tabo generates general purpose financial statements.
It's management purpose, accounting. Sorry.
Okay, you're going with management, but it's general purpose. If it's general, is it specific or is it summarized?
I would go with, what's this? General, is it subjective or objective?
Okay,
When you say
general means it's not specific. General means it's summarized. General means it's not detailed.
Okay.
Oh,
No, yeah.
So where would we put it?
financial accounting.
Yes, okay, because it's general, it's not specific.
General, not
Okay, remember we said marketing is general. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Specific, social media, print, television. Do you see the difference?
Advertising. Yes.
Okay, this is specific marketing. This is specific purpose reporting. Reporting on social media, reporting on print, reporting on television. Okay, in terms of what we've spent in terms of marketing and advertising. That's specific. Okay, so general would be financial, specific would be management. Okay, makes sense?
Sure.
Okay, good. Next, Dumasani, back to you. Makes more use of subjective data.
Subjective data, I would say that is management accounting.
Yes, subjective means it can be customizable. It can be made for a specific purpose. It isn't following objective rules. Okay, objective would be the opposite. Okay, so I'm just going to answer that one as well. Subjective and objective, they're opposites. Subjective, customizable. Objective, not. Okay, factual. Okay. Tabo, you've got this one. Future-oriented reports. Which reports do you think will be looking at the future?
I think it's management.
Very good. 100%. Okay, managers need to focus on the future. They're looking at the present and they're looking at goals. Okay, they're looking at how do we achieve those goals, those targets. Okay, that's forward-looking. That's looking towards the future. Financial accountants look at the past. Okay, why do they look at the past? Because it has already happened. Okay, those transactions have already happened. Those transactions have taken place over the last financial year. Okay, if you look at those reports that I've shared with you on Cole Campus, sorry, let me just, okay, I'm not going to remove the writing. I'm just going to refer you to those reports, maybe just to quickly scroll down and just to highlight it here. Okay, I don't know if you can see that here at the bottom. Let me use a different color. Okay, NASPIS's 2020 financial processes, 2020 integrated reports, financial reports. Do you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, this is looking at last year, not this year. Okay, so forward looking, not. Looking at the past. All right, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. Okay, so just coming back to your activity, we have 3 more to do. Let's go back to Dumasani. Provides information mainly for internal users.
Internal users, that's management accounting.
Good. Must conform with standards that are externally set. Tabo?
External, that's financial.
Yes, external IFRS. Good. And the last one. Who wants to answer? Not subject to externally set standards. Anyone?
Management accounting.
100%. Yes. Okay, good. Right. So when you look at this activity, the important note to take away is you've got external and you've got internal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can keep it simple, you can get this right every time. Okay, this isn't a complete list. I could give you others as well. But the point is, does it speak to external reporting or does it speak to internal reporting? Happy with this activity?
Yes.
Nice. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Something else to consider. Do you know what a cost center is?
Yeah, no, I think like at work we've got different departments, and then we all have our cost centers, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I think, yeah, I haven't thought about it, honestly.
That's perfect. That's 100% correct. A cost center could be a department. Okay, departments have certain costs that they need to account for. And that's why we call it a cost center when we look at accounting. Okay, so from a management accounting perspective, okay, maybe you've spoken to or you know some of the management accountants in your organization or even just general accountants. If you ask them about a cost center, they're referring to costs. They're referring to expenses. Okay, every department will have certain costs. Right, some departments are seen as cost centers because they don't bring in any revenue. Okay, if they bring in revenue, then they're called a revenue center or an income center. It's something different. Okay, revenue meaning you're bringing in income. Okay, sales would be seen as revenue, okay, as a revenue center. A cost center would be something like IT. Does IT sell anything? No, they don't, but we need IT to operate. Okay, IT needs new equipment, IT needs new servers, IT needs software, IT needs hardware, etc. Okay, it's a cost center. Okay, does that make sense? Are you happy with that?
Yes, happiness. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you're on the mark. Okay, on the money. All right, a cost center is a department basically. Okay, but a very specific department that consumes resources.
So a department that doesn't consume resources like sales, you would refer that as what? Center, revenue center.
Are you referring to the JSE?
No, I am referring to a department within the company. Let's say takes a sales department that needs to go out and actually bring in revenue for the business.
Yes, then that would.
Is that
Yeah, then that could be seen more as a revenue center rather than a cost center. But remember, even salespeople will have certain costs as well. Yeah, so it just depends on the classification. Remember, it's management accounting, so it'll be subjective.
Oh, yeah.
All right, there could be cost centers and revenue centers. They could be combined into one. It all depends on how they're going to report on that information. Right, and again, it depends on the manager. Sometimes the manager wants to see both. They want to see the sales and they want to see the costs. Right. Ideally, you should be looking at both. If a department has both, if a department is bringing in revenue and incurring costs, then you would obviously want to manage both sides of that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. I like the questions. These are really, really, really good. Okay. Are all of you happy with activity 2C in terms of context?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, it's important to know what the difference is because we will look at instances where you have both revenue, okay, costs, you'll have sales, cost of sales, you'll have internal, external, there'll be a mixture when you see different activities later on. Okay, we're still looking at introduction. Okay, chapter 1 and 2 are still quite basic in terms of content. There isn't really anything specific in terms of debits and credits. Okay, that's coming up in the next chapter. Okay, activity 2D. Have any of you looked at it yet?
No.
Not yet. Okay. Activity 2D is a nice practice activity to see if you recall some of the points that we've looked at so far from chapters 1 and 2. Mainly chapter 2, because this is obviously an activity from chapter 2's content. Two of these that I just want to highlight, these aren't so important, okay? When looking at materiality, IFRS, GAAP, all of those are important, okay? Because those are things that we've looked at in the actual content in chapter 2. Those two, this is history, and we're not going to test history because history is based on the past, and we don't need to know how accounting was created. We need to know how it's used in today's terms. Okay, so when looking at Luca Pacioli, you can go read up on the history. It's in the textbook, but it's not necessary. He's obviously the father of accounting. Okay, and then something that you might or might not have known, 45% refers to this, the maximum marginal income tax rate for individuals. Right, and that's why when I spoke about the budget speech earlier, that point was speaking to this activity. Okay, if you watched the budget, you would have seen the finance minister, Mr. Tito Mboweni, spoke about the tax rates that individuals pay, and he spoke about the progressive tax rates, the sliding scale. All right, I don't know how many of you know, but in South Africa, we have a sliding scale. In other words, the more you earn, the more tax you pay. Okay, 45% is applicable to people earning over 1.5 million a year. Okay, so if you're earning more than 1.5 million a year, now you're going to start getting taxed at a higher tax rate. Okay, that's not the exact figure. Okay, obviously, it's around about 1.5 million, right? That was the announcement. It didn't really change. Okay, it has always been 45%. That has been the highest tax rates. Okay, so very, very, very wealthy people earning large amounts of income, okay, obviously pay higher amounts of tax. That's just how the system works. All right, so those two you might or might not know. It just depends on how much history you know and how much general knowledge you know. Okay, the rest you'll be able to do. Right, so I don't want to cover it with you now because it might spoil the activity for you. I'd much rather you try to do it yourself and then just check it with the answers in the textbook. Okay. All right, and then we've got one other activity which comes up later on in the textbook, which looks at the difference between accounting and bookkeeping. Okay, does anyone know what the difference is? Okay, we have less than a minute. If it does time out, please don't stress. The link doesn't change, so just please use the same link. I'll restart the class, and then we can complete the rest. We will probably need another 10 minutes or so just to wrap up the last bit. Okay, but before it times out, can someone give me an explanation here? Is there a difference between accounting and bookkeeping?
Geez, not that I can think of.
Okay, you don't know, not sure.
Not sure, actually.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to give you all a minute to think about it while we rejoin the next session. Zoom is going to time out any second now. Let's come back from the slight intermission, and then let's wrap up and look at the last two activities before we end this week's session. Okay. Once it times out, I will restart the class. Okay. It has timed out. Let's restart the class. Okay, I'm just going to give the students a few minutes just to return, and then we'll continue. All right, so welcome back. Let's continue. We were talking about the differences between accounting and bookkeeping, and we were debating whether there's a difference or not. So maybe just to highlight something, if you go through the actual theory content, you'll see I've discussed this whole diagram on the actual week 3 content that's on Cole Campus. But just to maybe summarize a little bit of it with you now, just to show you the actual steps. Step 1, transaction. Step 2, source document. Step 3, journals. Step 4, general ledger. Step 5, trial balance. And then, I need to move this down. It's going to move it slightly. Okay, let me just leave it like that for now. Okay, you've got those 5 steps. The last step, I'll just write that last step in, is the financial statements. All right, so those are the steps. When you're looking at accounting versus bookkeeping, right, accountants are working at the higher levels. In other words, they're working more on the financial statements because accountants have a greater level of skill in terms of interpreting and analyzing and creating that information. Right, bookkeepers are generally involved here at the transaction stage. They're recording transactions on source documents. They're journalizing transactions. It's at a slightly lower level. Accountants can generally do both, okay? But bookkeepers can't generally do accounting because that requires a higher level of application in terms of rules and interpretation and understanding. Okay, right, so when you're looking at the differences between accounting and bookkeeping, accountants look at reporting. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at the financial statements. Bookkeepers look at the process, okay, the processing, the invoices, the filing, all of that. Okay, notice the word bookkeeping, okay, keeping records, right? They're not looking at the analysis per se. Okay, bookkeepers don't really do any analysis. Accountants would. Okay, financial managers would. Financial managers would actually be a step up in terms of level. Okay, accountants create the information, a manager would use the information. So in terms of your course, we're trying to provide you with information as though a manager would be acting as a maybe supervisor, okay, a CEO, someone that's in a superior position and making decisions on behalf of the company. Right, accountants can bring you the information. You need to know how to use the information to make decisions. Okay, makes sense?
Yes. Okay.
Perfect. All right, then you've got a list of transactions here. Okay, transactions. Who's involved in a transaction? Do you know? Can you give me the parties involved in a transaction? Which parties are involved in a transaction?
In a transaction, I would say it's a customer and the business.
Yes. Better name, buyer and seller.
Buyer and seller, okay.
All right, so when you have transactions you will see in chapter 3. Transactions have 2 sides. Transactions have 2 parties. Transactions have a debit and a credit. Okay, the reason for that is because a buyer and a seller enter into a transaction. There'll always be a debit and a credit. Okay, because you're accounting for both sides of the transaction. Right, so we'll see different transactions later on when we actually look at chapter 3's application. Okay, we're going to take rules and we're going to apply those rules and we're going to see if we can interpret transactions correctly. Okay, transactions. Can you give me an example of a transaction? Did any of you engage in a transaction earlier today? Did you complete a transaction? Did you carry out a transaction? Did you enter into a transaction? Did any of you have any transactions earlier today?
Yeah, I would say.
Yes, give me the examples.
Was pouring petrol at the gas station.
Perfect. Okay, what's the transaction there?
The transaction was that I had to pay for the diesel.
100%. Paying for diesel, fuel. Right. That's a perfect example of a transaction. Where would that fall? It would fall here. Payments. Okay, you used cash to purchase something. Okay, it was an expense. You bought fuel. Fuel is an expense. Okay, fuel is used up. Okay, fuel is an asset for the petrol station. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, and these are things you'll learn about later on in other chapters. Okay, we'll get to a chapter called inventory, and we'll talk about what makes inventory. Okay, fuel for you and I, for everyone, generally speaking, okay, is an expense. Okay, because we don't sell fuel. Okay, we're not selling fuel. We're buying it to use. Okay, we're using the fuel. Fuel is an expense. Okay, Tabo, do you want to share your example with us?
Yeah, I think I was in the office and I bought lunch in the canteen.
Perfect. Buying lunch. All right, how is that a transaction? You've exchanged money for lunch. Okay, did you use money to pay for it, hey?
No, my card.
Card, yes. Card is fine. Okay, card is also a form of payment. Okay, the card would obviously affect your bank account. Do you agree?
Yes, it's a debit on my bank.
100%. Debit on your bank. Yeah, it's a debit because it comes off your bank balance. 100%. Very good. Yeah. Really nice examples. Okay, so these are the type of transactions you'll see as you continue learning more about record keeping and accounting. For now, we just need to show the groups of transactions. Transactions can be grouped. Okay, so notice both of your transactions would be grouped under category number 6. Whether I'm buying fuel or whether I'm buying lunch, it's still a cash purchase. Both of you would have used cash. It would have affected your bank account. Your bank account would have been affected. It would have decreased, and your expenses would have gone up because you have a fuel expense and you have a lunch expense. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
100%. Great. Okay, so this is what we're going to be focusing on as we continue going through more examples later on in chapter 3. You're not going to see those types of transactions now. You're only going to see theory, rules, okay, background information regarding accounting. All right, then just to end off, there's a note about a source document. What is a source document? What is a journal? This speaks to the accounting cycle. Then you've got bank reconciliation. This is a separate chapter. We'll look at a bank recon much later on. We've got a general ledger. When we've got a trial balance, also part of the cycle. There is one correction though that I would like you to please make in your textbook. I announced it earlier today as well for the full-time students. The statement of financial position doesn't show income and expenses. It shows assets and liabilities. Please correct that. Okay. Assets and liabilities determine your financial position. Where do you see income and expenses? In the statement of profit and loss and other comprehensive income. Okay, there's income and expenses. That's correct. Okay, so please just correct that. There's a typo in the textbook. The statement of financial position shows us our assets and liabilities. Okay, we spoke about financial position in one of the previous lessons as well. Okay, when I spoke about assets and liabilities, what do you want more of? Do you want more assets or do you want more liabilities? Let me ask both of you.
I want more assets.
Yes, all of you would want more assets and liabilities, right? Okay, you don't want to owe lots of people in terms of loans. Okay, in terms of credit. Okay, credit is actually debt. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so financial position is looking at this. This is a good financial position. If you have more assets than liabilities, you're in a good position. This person is in a bad position. Less assets, more liabilities. Okay. Happy?
Then I've got a question.
Yes, what's the question?
If you look at page 29, it says there the statement of financial position measures financial position, which is assets equals to owner's equity plus liabilities.
Correct.
Why are we not mentioning owner's equity when we are defining the statement of financial position?
Yeah, it's a good question. The financial position summarizes assets and liabilities and summarizes the owner's equity. The detail isn't covered because there's a separate statement. There's a statement of changes in equity. Okay, you don't cover that financial statement. There's actually 4 financial statements. This is statement 1, that's statement 2, this is statement 3, and there's a 4th one, which is a cash flow statement. Okay, so you will see that in NASPIS's financial statements. You're not going to see that in your textbook. Okay, it's kept quite basic. You don't cover cash flow You don't cover statement of changes in equity. The statement of changes in equity is looking specifically at the owner's equity. Right, so the primary focus in the statement of financial position is the assets versus the liabilities. Yes, you will see the owner's equity, and you do, but it's summarized. The detail is in a separate statement.
Okay.
Okay, right, but you don't need to know those two because they're not covered in your textbook. All right, we can't assess what's not in your textbook. Okay, it wouldn't be fair. So the content that's in your textbook is what will be assessed. Have you studied accounting before, Dumasani? Maybe.
Yeah, I did that in matric.
Oh,
Long time
great.
ago. I
Long time
took the
ago.
subject, but yeah.
Okay, so you have some knowledge of it, yeah.
Yes.
As I said in the previous week's lesson, and in even some of the videos, you don't have to worry about having any background in accounting. If students have never studied accounting before, it doesn't matter. Okay, we're going to be looking at all the basic rules and principles so that everybody will know how to interpret and understand accounting. Okay, so it's not necessary to have studied it before. It's actually better if you haven't, because then you have a clean slate. Okay, but yeah, you're perfectly correct in terms of your knowledge. Okay, there is another statement, but that statement talks about the owner's equity in more detail. Happy with that?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, nice questions tonight, I must say. Well done. Good efforts. Okay, then the last bit is just the note about your multiple choice. This is the final activity that you need to complete in chapter 2. As I said, all the answers are provided to you at the back of the textbook. If I was you, I would try use this as a test your knowledge, okay, as a MCQ type of assessment. If you can go through all these multiple choice questions and you can get them correct, don't look at the answers though. Try answer them. Maybe do it in pencil. Do it in pencil or do it on a separate piece of paper and then mark it. Maybe you get that one right. Maybe you get that one wrong. Maybe you get that one right. Maybe you get that one right. And then actually see how many of these you would have answered correctly, because this is good practice for your online assessments. Okay, because things are still under lockdown. Obviously, things are a bit better now. It's lockdown level 1, actually. We had some good news earlier in the week. Things have opened up from lockdown level 3 to level 1. So hopefully, things will get back to normal eventually as the vaccine rolls out and things improve. But currently, in terms of Boston Media House, you're still going to be doing an online assessment for the first assessment. It might change later on in the year, but for now, it's online. Okay, so please use these activities to help you prepare. These are really, really great practice activities to get you thinking about how multiple choice could come up in tests and exams. Okay, and that basically summarizes and concludes chapter 2. There is a summary, and there's just a note here regarding computerized accounting. Nowadays, everything is computerized. This is what is used in reality to account for different transactions. But we will be looking at transactions in the next chapter.
Yes,
Any
I'm
questions?
using Sage for payroll.
Pardon, say that again. I didn't get it.
And I said I'm using Sage for payroll.
Yes, you're using Sage for payroll. Excellent. So you have really good knowledge of accounting. Yeah, Sage is a computer package or application software. Okay, it's software that helps with a specific application, right? So if you're in payroll, if you're in HR, that's something that you would have to use as a tool to help you with your job. Okay, that's brilliant. Nice observation. All right, are there any other questions, topics, anything else that you want us to go over tonight? Dumasani, Tabo?
No, just gonna go
Thank
through.
you.
Okay, Dumasani seems happy. Tabo?
I'm also happy.
Also happy. Okay, awesome. Great. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for attending the live session. I do appreciate your time and effort. We will have more live sessions next week. As I said, the full-time classes, only they'll be affected because of the on-campus workshops at Boston being hosted during the day. But yeah, part-time will stay the same. So hopefully I'll see the two of you again next week. Thank you again for attending. The videos will be uploaded to Cold Campus. I will send Janet, the acting academic manager, tonight's video, and then that'll be uploaded eventually on Col Campus. Thanks, Dumisani. Thank you,
Just a
Thabo.
question: is it going to be the same time even next week?
Well, depending on what we need to cover, okay, I am available earlier, but I'm available on the platform. In terms of the live session, we're just starting the live session at 7:30 because sometimes students have problems attending the earlier one. When I've
really
hosted
appreciate
when I've hosted on-campus classes at 5:30, a lot of students are often late because of traffic, because of work, etc. So that's why we've just hosted it at 7:30. But later on, when we do more difficult topics, then I will start earlier because we will need more time to get through more content. So it just depends on what topic we have for the week. Week 1, week 2, week 3, a lot of basics, a lot of theory, not a lot of application yet. The application's coming up later on. And then we'll have longer sessions and we can start earlier as well. It just depends. Okay. But those announcements will be made. You will be informed on the actual roadmap. If you look at the roadmap, it has a link to our Zoom classes, and it also tells you the time and the date of your actual lessons as well.
Okay,
yeah, so that's a good point. Why did you ask? Do you want earlier or do you want later? What was your thoughts?
No, it's because I was stuck in traffic and I thought that is actually at 5:30 because when I got the time to go. So 7:30 actually works much better for me.
For you. Okay, great. So yeah, that's also good to know. So it is a consideration. I mean, I'm flexible with the time. I mean, we start at 5:30. We have that time from 5:30 to 9:30 even. So I don't mind if we start earlier or we start later, but I will definitely take that into consideration. But as I said, it depends on what topics we're covering each week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Hank.
Pleasure. Thank you, Dumisani. Thank you, Thabo. Take care. Stay safe. See you next week.
Alrighty. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.